All said and done, there have been 7 entries in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre film series. Leatherface is as iconic as Freddy or Jason, but yet people still know very little about his character, and there's a reason for that. The reason is that there have been several different Leatherfaces. One of the most interesting aspects of the Chainsaw series is its complete lack of continuity and coherent timelines. So today, we're going to take a look at the entire series and figure out just how many Leatherfaces that there actually were. We start off on August 18th, 1973, a date given to us by Dan Fielding during the text prologue. We get our first group of unlucky teenagers on a road trip, and this one is Sally, her boyfriend, her brother, and 2 friends on their way to revisit their old family home somewhere in Texas. Of course, they fall prey to a crazed, inbred family of cannibals who just happen to have the estate next door. So we're going to meet the hitchhiker, the cook, and the chainsaw-wielding Leatherface. Their names are never spoken in the actual film, and we only learn Leatherface's name from the end credit crawl. He's played kind of like an oversized baby here, mostly killing out of fear. We never see his actual face, but he goes through a few stylistic changes over the course of the film. We first see him in his butcher's garb, his most iconic look, a more matronly appearance, and his final dinnerware look. The dinner scene also introduces us to Grandpa, who is apparently 124 years old. We get a bunch of the tropes we'll be repeating throughout many of the later films. Leatherface slams a door, someone gets hung on a hook, a body jumps out of a freezer, someone gets chased through the woods by Leatherface, and someone has an uncomfortable meal with the family. We end with Sally getting away, the hitchhiker is killed by a passing truck, and Leatherface receives a nasty wound to the leg because of the truck driver, who may still be running down that road to this very day. The film ends with Leatherface's crazy chainsaw dance. So the second film was released in 1986, and the opening crawl establishes that this is a direct sequel, recounting events of the previous film, stating that the police couldn't find the farmhouse, even though the ending of the last film pretty much showed it to be right along the side of the road. It gives us the time frame of being 13 years later, which places the film setting in 1986 as well. We're reintroduced to the cook, who's given a name here as Drayton Sawyer. Leatherface is back and now acts more like a randy teenager, developing a crush on our female lead. We're introduced to a new member of the family, Chop Top, who most likely was in Vietnam during the events of the first film. He received a head injury there and now has a large steel plate in his head. He tends to carry around Nubbins, who is the stuffed and mummified corpse of the hitchhiker from the first film. Leatherface basically only sports 2 looks in this film, both of which are basically callbacks to his butcher's outfit and dinnerware. Chop Top frequently refers to him as Bubba, even though that it's likely this is merely a nickname and not his actual name. Also, this film, which definitely took a more comedic tone, avoided repeating the events of the previous film, with the only repeat being the uncomfortable dinner and Grandpa's lousy mallet skills. Quick note, Grandpa looks good for 137. Anyway, this one really comes to a head as Dennis Hopper, as the uncle of the first film's Sally and Franklin, comes face-to-face with the family for a no-holds-barred chainsaw battle. Leatherface takes a huge chainsaw through the belly and a mallet to the head. Drayton sets off a grenade, which apparently kills him, Leatherface, Dennis Hopper, and Grandpa in the blast. Stretch, our female lead, takes out Chop Top with a chainsaw to the belly and ends the film with her own crazy dance. I think it's pretty clear here that the entire family is dead, with Stretch being the only survivor. So when we get to the third film, we're going to take an interesting turn. The opening crawl tells us that a single member of the family was prosecuted for the events of the first film. His name is given as W.E. Sawyer, and people believe that Leatherface is just an alternate personality of his and does not exist as a separate entity. Because this is most likely the cook character from the first film, and it states that he was executed in 1981, 5 years before the events of Part 2, it seems pretty clear that it is stating that the second film does not exist. Also, when we see Leatherface, he shows no signs of injury from the chainsaw wound or grenade blast, and yet wears a leg brace from his injuries at the end of the first film. That establishes this is a second, alternate Leatherface to the one that we saw in the second film. This Leatherface is darker, more violent, and more mature than those we've seen before. He only sports the one look in this film, and it's somewhat similar to the butcher's outfit. His family never refers to him by name, only calling him Junior. New family members include Tex, played by Viggo Mortensen, Tinker, and Alfredo, all apparently brothers to Leatherface. We also meet Anne, who is apparently Leatherface's mother, and Bobby, a young girl whose relation is never stated in the film, although supplemental materials state her to be Leatherface's daughter, conceived by raping one of his victims, which I think qualifies as one of the darker conceits of the series. Grandpa's back too, but he's not looking very alive anymore, but at least he doesn't look blown up by a grenade. We get a few of our favorite things here, like people on a road trip stopping by the ominous gas station, a girl gets chased through the woods with Leatherface right behind her, and there's another awkward dinner scene. Of course, but we do get something different at the ending here. Ken Foray saves the day and shoots up the place, killing Ann, Tinker, and Grandpa again. He manages to set Tex on fire and fights Leatherface and apparently dies. Gina, our female protagonist, smashes Leatherface in the head a bunch, and he sinks under the water. So Gina gets away, Ken Foray's not dead somehow, and they kill Alfredo and get away, while Leatherface shows up to prove that he's not dead, although he doesn't feel the need to do a crazy dance, which makes me sad. Okay, so the fourth film is Complete Crazy Town. It's kind of a remake, but not really. There are similarities to the previous films, but enough differences to make it very clear that this is both a sequel and a sort of a reboot, and that again, only the first film mattered. The opening crawl does acknowledge the existence of the previous two films, making reference to two minor incidents. A quartet of teens are off again on a road trip, this time coming back from prom. Although they're just driving home from prom and are presumably in their hometown, they often seem to have no clue where they are, who anyone is. And wait a second, is that Renee Zellweger? Alright. Well, Leatherface is back, of course, and completely reverts to the childlike and extremely feminine version of the character from the original. It's very obvious that he's not the same character from Part 3, and he's still alive and unblown up, so he's not the guy from Part 2 either. What we have here is definitely Leatherface number 3. He gets several looks here, ranging from classic styling to an old woman homemaker ensemble, and then finally full-on Leatherface drag. Oddly enough, no one again refers to him by name, simply calling him Leather throughout. So by the time that Matthew freaking McConaughey shows up, controlling a robot leg by remote control, we know that things are getting weird. We get another new family member in W.E., who is presumably not the same named character who was executed in 1981, according to the prologue of Part 3, and Matthew McConaughey's Vilmer character has a crazy girlfriend. We get all the standard tropes of the chainsaw chase through the woods, the hanging on the meat hook, the freezer jump, and the uncomfortable family dinner, but then we get this whole thing where the family is working for the Illuminati in an effort to increase people's fear. Vilmer's real good at hiding this as he drives around in a truck with the word Illuminati painted on the door, like you do. Renee Zellweger gets away, a possibly Illuminati biplane kills Matty Mick, and Leatherface brings back the crazy dance. Bonus points for a little random scene at the end which brings back several alumni from the original film. So the next entry is an official remake as opposed to the half remakes of the previous entries. The opening prologue is almost identical to the original with a very familiar voice as well. This is absolutely a new Leatherface from the previous entries as we're rebooting from the ground up, even giving the character a new name. The family is identified as the Hewitts here, and Leatherface is named as Thomas Hewitt. So we're on Leatherface number 4. This is the first film to give us a peek under the mask as we see Leatherface's true face, and it's a lovely sight indeed. We get all new family members here: Sheriff Hoyt, Luda May, Henrietta, Monty, the Tea Lady, and Jedediah. Since it's a remake, we get all the classic bits: teenagers on a road trip, the ominous gas station, the door slam, the meat hook, the freezer peekaboo, which is a bathtub here, the woods chase, but hey, no awkward dinner table scene. Jessica Biel plays our final girl here, chopping off Mr. Hewitt's arm, killing Sheriff Hoyt, and rescuing this, baby-looking thing. I'm not going to call this a full-on crazy dance, but it's close enough. So the next film throws everything for a loop because it's actually connected to the film that preceded it, although it is a prequel and not a sequel. After a brief introduction that's set in 1939 depicting the birth of little Thomas, we jump ahead to 1969. The family is mostly the same, and we get to see Sheriff Hoyt again, although he was killed off in the last one. For most of the film, Leatherface wears a half mask, only covering the bottom portion of his face, but later on he dons one of the main character's faces for the first ever skin mask. Since it was absent from the previous film, we get the awkward dinner scene in this one, but we get an ending unlike any of the others. The final girl is actually killed off, with none of the main characters surviving. Instead of a crazy dance, we get Leatherface's sullen walk down the street, his head bowed down, most likely in shame from being in this one because it's a pretty dull entry. So our next entry, simply titled Texas Chainsaw 3D, completely switches up the game again. The opening of the film takes us all the way back to the beginning, picking up right where the first one left off. The family is once again called the Sawyers, and Leatherface's name is officially given as Jedediah. So this is definitely a new Leatherface, which makes him number 5. This is the most confusing film in the whole series, as the opening is definitely 1973, since we're shown the clips from the first film, but this film takes place in 2012, shown by this headstone, which sets it at about 39 years later. So in that case, this baby from the opening segment is 39 years old and is now played by Alexandra Daddario, who clearly looks 39 years old. Also, this guy really has this aging thing down. 39 years old and he doesn't look a day older. All that aside, we get a new look for Leatherface, a road trip in the van, a meat hook hanging, a freezer jump, a chase through the woods, and a door slam. It's a nice touch with Drayton Sawyer being played by Chop Top actor Bill Moseley and a quick cameos from the original Sally and Leatherface. We even get a quick return of Grandpa, played by the original actor from the 1974 film. But that's about all we have, though, as the rest of it is pretty crap. We don't even get a crazy dance from anyone with a chainsaw, and instead get stuck with a do your thing, cuz. So finally, later this year, it looks like another entry into this series, simply called Leatherface. Details aren't official, but it looks like it's set in Leatherface's teenage years, and his name will be Jackson Sawyer, which seems to indicate that it's yet another version of the character, bringing us to number 6, but we'll have to wait to see if that stands. So there it is. 7 movies with 5 different versions of Leatherface, with a possible 6th on the way. I guess the important question to ask now is, which one would win a fight? The Leatherface from parts 1 and 2, 1 and 3, 1 and 4, the remake and prequel, or from parts 1 and 3D? I have my own theories. I've got a little money on it, so let me hear what you think down below.